Good morning and welcome everybody to the Mayor's Press Conference that we hold each Wednesday morning at 10:30 after the prior Mayor and City Council meeting on Tuesday. We are always live on Facebook, and we're here to do a little follow-up on the discussions and clarifications on things that took place at the council meeting, and to also have citizens to be able to ask a few questions if they like on Facebook. Before we move forward, got a couple things I want to mention to the citizens of Columbus. We have a heat advisory in this part of the state, and there's a lot of warnings out there about just how hot it is outside and the humidity, and the illness that this can bring on to folks who do not stay hydrated. I advise people to keep in touch with the elderly and the young children, and also animals and pets outside. This terrible heat that we're having, that I know that many of us are used to that grew up in the Deep South. Some of these temperatures are hotter than we've experienced before, and people can get sick easily, and it can cause death in some cases. So please, everybody, keep an eye out for the heat advisory. A couple of events that I'm going to mention, and I'm probably not including everything that's coming up. I encourage people to look on Facebook and websites to see the activities that are going on in the city, but one that I know of this weekend, I believe, is Main Street Columbus is sponsoring Let's Flamingo, an event that they started last year with activities downtown. This Saturday, you may have noticed some of the pink flamingos around the city. You can go to their website to learn more about that. Also, next weekend, Party with a Purpose. The benefit committee with Rhonda Sanders and Julie Cooley Parker are having a big event next weekend that's always lots of fun, brings a lot of people together in this city to raise money for their organization that does a lot of good throughout the city. If anybody would like for me to mention their events during the press conferences, please be sure to reach out. Nobody has ever asked me to that I can remember, but I try to take note of those, and am happy to help try to spread the word. I'll also put it on my Facebook page, and when appropriate, we can put it on the city Facebook page as well. Last night, we had some very good news that Atmos presented the Fire and Rescue Department with a check for $6,300 to help purchase an electric exhaust fan. Operations Manager Michelle Whittle was there with several members of her team. We really appreciate them reaching out and doing this. If you didn't see the council meeting last night, you can watch it on Facebook, and she was very articulate about why she believes it's important for local businesses and individuals to support the city in these important areas that we carry out for our citizens. We all know that it's difficult to have the proper funding for all of our departments, but especially those that are first responders like the police department and the fire and rescue. So I hope others will follow Ms. Whittle's example that Atmos did last night, and continue to reach out and support our city. We are definitely better together, and we hope to see more philanthropy like that in the near future. Later in the meeting today, we're going to be talking about several things that were discussed last night. I'm going to actually bring our city engineer, Kevin Stafford, and our city attorney, Jeff Turnage, up to talk about a couple of them. But a couple of other things I want to mention. A lot of people have asked me, what is the actual count of registered voters in Columbus? So I did double check with the circuit clerk this morning, and we currently have 14,646 registered qualified voters. I do not have the numbers from the people that signed a petition and sent in emails. I don't have those numbers. I'm not sure if we've got them all yet, or what our next step is.
We have the numbers, but it's likely going to change, so I would like to wait because of the confusion about whether email or
Yes.
signature, the numbers will change because there are people who signed and also sent an email.
Yeah, what our COO is saying, that we're not we're still trying to clarify some of this. As the attorney spoke to last night with Butler Snow, that they suggested that we have an answer by our next council meeting, but it's likely that we'll have something before then. We will be sending them this data as well. They requested it quickly, and I'm going to let our city attorney speak to this some too. The question, as most people know, have been, did they have to sign a petition, or could email notifications count? We are trying to get a ruling on that from the Secretary of State said they didn't know for sure, and so they've asked for a ruling from the Attorney General's office. We have as well. We got an acknowledgement back that the Attorney General's office has our request, and we've asked them to expedite it, but I don't know how quickly that will be. It could be to the point where we're able to look at the numbers and know that they're not there, regardless, and so an announcement will be, but we're going to do our due diligence on this to make sure everybody feels comfortable with the process. I'm going to speak more to this towards the end of my press conference. I have a lot of people asking me, and sometimes it comes up at the council meetings, about the number of employees that we have. Are we short in certain areas? So I had Miss Pat, our HR director, give me an update, and from the email I got from her, our Parks and Rec department is currently short 2 full-time employees. Our Public Works department is currently short 3 full-time employees, and we will, by the end of the month, we will be 1 employee short at the landfill. Parks and Rec. Make sure I've got these right. The Trotter is short 1 full-time maintenance tech, 2 part-time maintenance techs that work at night and on weekends for staffing and cleaning. Fire and Rescue is short 3 full-time employees, and the Columbus Police Department is short 8 employees at this time. So we are always, as we mentioned before, we are always working hard to fill these positions. They're not easy to fill, but that's kind of where we are right now. So at this time, I'm going to ask Kevin Stafford, our city engineer, to come up, and I've asked him to give us an update on the bridge repair. I announced on January the 31st that a settlement had been reached with the owners of the barge company, or the owners of the company that owned the barge that hit the bridge, for a little over $4 million to cover the cost of the repair. I had said on January the 31st, we were in hopes that that work may begin in late in May or April in the springtime. Now we thought it was going to begin this summer, and it still might, but I want Kevin, as the project manager of that, to give an update on that. And then I've also asked him to speak to the AIA grant that we announced last night for $150,000, and then the work that we took bids on. I'm going to ask him to speak on each one of those things. Mr. Stafford?
Thank you, Mayor. First off, on the bridge, a couple things. When we had our kickoff meeting, the contractor originally anticipated an April to May, more likely May, start date. As part of the negotiation and settlement, we all decided that it would be best interest for cost purposes to let the contractor define when they could start. One of the snags they run into is being able to get a crane operator and the crane itself on site. They're in the process with Barnhart and getting that date nailed down. We had about an hour-and-a-half long conversation with them yesterday. They're hoping in the next week and a half to have that date finalized. They're still thinking mid-August they should get started. The materials that are needed on the front end are here and secured on site, ready to go. They have a position out at the port to load and unload from their smaller crane. And then they will need a larger crane as well. And at one time they wanted to use the port facilities as a crane for 5 different milestones during the project. And right now the port is very busy, operating almost 24/7. And so they're having to go to plan B, which is to bring in additional cranes off-site on port property, but off-site from the actual port's existing facilities to start. That's been a little bit of their delay as well. So we're working through with them right now to try to identify those 5 milestone dates so that we can go sit down with the port. And if they only need it for a day or two, hoping we can work through with them to find time for them to utilize that facility to reduce costs. So I fully anticipate in the next couple of weeks we'll have both the start date and any new associated costs with it nailed down. They're still anticipating an early 24 finish, hopefully sometime in March. if all goes to plan, and for their sake, they hope they obviously finish sooner. So the good news is if there's any new added costs, we did discuss also, there's some electrical repairs and also some painting allowances that we feel like are a little bit larger than they may need, and so that may help offset some of these new costs that they're looking at right now. But the biggest thing is we hope we can work out some deal with the port to use their crane to help reduce some new crane costs that they may have to have. So I'll stop there, and I don't know if there's any questions on the bridge while I'm there before I jump to the next subject. And again, just for reiteration, Maloof Construction is the contractor for that. Barnhart is their sub that most of y'all are familiar with that do heavy lifting and things of that nature that are on the front end, have to help them get started. So another thing we covered last night, first off, our airport once again has been successful year after year in securing FAA grants. Last year they were awarded, use round numbers, $400,000 toward a taxiway rehab. As costs have gone up, well, we knew on the front end that was not enough to cover the project. And so last night was the acceptance of an additional $150,000 to now put the FAA grant total up to about $550,000. That's 90% of the cost that's covered by FAA. Another 5% is covered by MDOT, that's roughly $30,000. And then the last 5% is split between the city and the county. Each would pay around $15,000 for their match. So a total project, $600,000. That is a taxiway pavement rehabilitation, which in our terms is a mill and overlay. So that project is now fully funded and should be moving forward soon. And then lastly, we had bids taken for drainage improvements along 15th Street over by Union Academy. Right now, that street experiences all surface flooding in heavy rains because there's no underground piping until you get south of the school. This is going to extend that piping further north, put in 2 boxes that will catch that water, put it underground so that as you drive through in heavy rains, it will now be underground in pipe system versus in the street. So I think the mayor has videos in the past of people almost in boats out there. I know I've stood in about calf deep water out there in the past as well. So this will help that situation. It's at the very upper end of that basin. Water's rushing out of the hills around 10th Avenue, 10th Street, Military Road, all that's surface flow. And so it hits that area where it's flat, and then that's why all of a sudden where it gathers there. If you can imagine where the old medical clinic was, that's where this project will be, and it'll run south about 3/4 of a block. So Weathers Construction, well, first off, both the bids were the exact same number. First time we've had that happen. Weathers Construction is a local contractor the city's done drainage with successfully in the past, and so the council approved to move forward with them. Total bid for that was again $145,000. City had budgeted originally $150,000 for that work. So we'll be moving forward, giving them notice to proceed, or notice of award first, and then notice to proceed soon. Have not since last night spoken to them to know when that may kick off, but I would anticipate within a month's time they'll be ready to go on such a small project.
Do you have any questions for Kevin on any of those things?
Is that part of the ARPA?
No.
Is it just being funded by the city?
Right. No, it's being funded through the Modernization Act. Some people call it the use tax. Some people call it the internet sales tax. It can be used for drainage along streets or drainage in general. So this is the same money, if you'll recall, council set aside about $220,000 for Beach Street. It came in way under budget using a local small contractor, and so that money was basically taken that was left over, reallocated for this project, which had been on the shelf for a while as well. So really getting 2 for 1, if you will, all through that modernization money that was set aside.
Last night, somebody, I think it was Councilman Mickens, said something about this job having been rebid. Can you explain what happened there?
Yeah, so the same small contractor that did the Beach Street project, this project's a little bit bigger. Our hope was that he would be able to bid this project, keeping it under $75,000, but the way the state law is written is, if it's over 50 and under 75, you still have to be licensed. He is not licensed, whereas Beach Street, he kept it under that. The law just recently changed. So first time he did not bid for that reason, and he was still interested, expressed that he would like to submit a bid. He actually tried to team up with 2 different licensed contractors to help do the work. And so the hope was that knowing where his number was and going through a licensed contractor, the number would be drastically less than last time. Unfortunately, he couldn't find a way with one contractor due to personalities, and another contractor because their certificate of responsibility was for vertical work. This is horizontal work, so we would have had to have kicked them out. And so he didn't have time to find a third contractor to bid through. So this rebid was try to accommodate a cheaper cost, and at the end of the day, we had 2 bidders, and of course, you know, Mitchell was the low bidder last time, who bid again this time. And I always say when you rebid, you rarely get a cheaper cost unless you change the scope, and in this case, we didn't change the scope. So,
what was the small contractor that y'all were hoping to get to bid?
Jonathan Burns, he was the one that did the work on Beach Street. It's Jonathan Burns Enterprises.
That's all I have.
Kevin, I didn't ask you to do this, but would you please give an update too? We did a walkthrough on the plantings that just finished. Could you give everybody an update on that as well?
Sure. Highway 45 had 7 beds that had gone into different states of plant failure, bad health, low maintenance, low watering, who knows what it may have been. Cars running into it for that matter. We took bids, had 4 bidders on that. Evergreen Landscaping, local company, was the low bidder. Ballpark $75,000. Most of you probably run by and seen those now. The new design followed 2 standards. One that was a low maintenance standard that didn't have to be watered as much, that could take oil and grease off the street in a heavy rain that splashed upon it and still survive. And then 2 plants that didn't have to be maintained by Public Works all the time that were, I'm sorry, that was the main part. The other part is they're MDOT certified. So, you know, I was asked a question from the mayor. The largest bed is in front of the King Edward over by Bow Bridge, and there's not a single tree in there. And, you know, why in the world all the rest of them have it and that one does not? Well, there's a billboard on the back side. I think right now Cracker Barrel is advertised on it. By MDOT standards, they also have to protect and they permit those billboards, so we weren't allowed to put trees in that bed. So, but nonetheless, week before last, or was it last week, we walked it, went through everything. Plants are in good health and in good condition, and so the city has now taken over maintenance of these beds. There's a couple small punch list items that Evergreen's going to tackle that have nothing to do with the beds themselves, and so in all intents and purposes, that's been done now, and we'll move forward and watch them grow in. And the other thing I'll add, I guess, is S&S on the landscaping has now, S&S, also local contractor, was the low bidder for taking over the Highway 82 mowing maintenance. That also started last Monday. So while Public Works was finishing up over on 18th Avenue and East Columbus exit, they had already done some of the other exits. The military in East Columbus, they had already done 18th Avenue, 45, and then Main Street. So naturally, S&S started on Main Street, and they'll progress through. And basically, every 2 weeks, they'll go through that cycle of mowing for the next year. So that's what we'll be doing that. Now, the places that are not mowed, now MDOT is taking over that mowing 3 times a year, just after Memorial Day, just after the 4th, and just after Labor Day. So MDOT's aware of that, and they're hoping soon they're going to come through and mow for their post-July 4th mowing. So that's also under a different condition now than Public Works. And I think as Casey mentioned last night, he's now moving that same staff down into the wards, into a ward system, which I know Ms. Garrett's been working with him on a good bit. So.
Any questions?
Thank
you,
you.
Kevin. That was a very good synopsis on everything, much better than I could have carried us through. I'm about to bring Jeff Turnage, our city attorney, up, but one of the things that Kevin touched on reminded me of something I wanted to announce today. One of the things I've been asking that we consider, and I've been working with our COO, Jamie Garrett, on this, also Casey Bush, and also our city engineer, Kevin, that was just here. We get a lot of complaints about the little things that aren't being taken care of. A lot of the citizens think the potholes, which are not a little thing, they're a big thing, but just some of the things that make our city look a little better and a little tighter and cleaner in areas. And so one of the things that I've noticed too is that sometimes we're behind on getting our street signs corrected. There's always a lot of damage that can happen to those along the way. So along with our idea of going back to or establishing a ward system, I've asked us to also look into how that we can start no later than September what we're going to reference as pothole and street sign day, or days, where we are focused strictly on getting potholes filled and street signs repaired. As we've got a C-Click Fix program that we're using now that just has not gotten us where we want to be with it. So we feel like focusing on those issues that are sightly and people see and send in a lot that they feel like aren't getting done in a timely fashion. If we have days in the month that we're strictly focusing on that, we can get more done, and then citizens can also see it happening, which I think will make everyone happier. So more to come on that. We're working out the details. I've also worked with Mr. Jim on this to have him in the group as we're working through it to make sure it's not going to affect the budgets in any way by doing this. The street signs and things we can make in-house. But I think by having designated days like that people are aware of, that are coming, It can help us get information in that we may not have about areas where potholes need to be filled and street signs and things need to be repaired. So more to come on that. So now I'm going to ask our city attorney to come up and talk about a few things that we went into executive session last night on a couple personnel matters. I'm going to have him speak to that. I'm also going to ask him to speak about the Burns Bottom project, which there was a vote the council took last night that the Planning Commission had also voted on, and then also a little bit about what was done last night about our obligation bonds for Probst Park. Mr. Turnage?
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning. I'll start with the easy one first. Normally, executive sessions are not necessarily easy, but last night we had two matters of personnel related to job performance of employees. The first employee was an employee, I guess you would say, of Park and Rec, but after he applied and got approved for the job, he never showed up, so the mayor and council terminated. The next one was job performance of an individual in the police department. A certified officer was suspended 5 working days for failure to follow policy. And that was as brief a executive session on employment matters as we've had that I can remember. As far as the planned unit development for Burns Bottom, probably the best building official in the state, ours, has already sent a letter to Martha Lee Porter, Kenny Weigel, telling her your planned unit development was approved by the mayor and city council. He emailed it out to her today.
She's the president.
Yes, Martha Lee Porter is the president of the Columbus Redevelopment Authority. And so this is good news. It's another step forward for the Burns Bottom project. What the application the CRA made, Columbus Redevelopment Authority made to the Planning Commission and then last night to the council was for planned unit development for the entire Burns Bottom district, which is starting behind Munson Brothers going north all the way to behind Little Dewey. They asked for the planned unit development to be approved because the lot sizes therefore can be smaller than the normal 6,500 square foot lots that the code requires, the city code. And this allowed us, rather than make 115 individual applications for variances to the Zoning Board of Adjustments, to do it all in one fell swoop to the Planning Commission and then to the Mayor and Council. It also changed, right now all of the lots are zoned R1, but this will allow for commercial to be interspersed throughout in more of a new urbanism plan. There'll be the wish and the hope is we'll have commercial on the two end, the north end and the south end, and then possibly some in the middle. But you know, it's going to be somewhat market driven by what the buyer wants to do with it and what the demand for the market is. So that we asked for flexibility to be built into that plan, so that was appreciated. I think it's going to help market the property. What was the third thing? The bond.
Yeah, the bond.
Did you want me to speak to the 10% and 1,500, or which?
Just whatever you're comfortable with, what we did last night.
Okay, the mayor and council took up the bond for the improvements to Probst Park, which is, we had a petition circulating. My understanding is we have approximately 800 and some odd votes in by email and signature, but we don't know whether some of those are duplications. So if there are 14,000 plus registered voters, that's not going to be enough to trigger a referendum. I think it's a smart idea to go ahead and see if some of the emails are signed, but it's really a moot point because there are not enough signatures, if you count them all, to trigger a referendum. I don't know if there's anything else I can say.
And what we voted on last night was?
Oh, the resolution the council took up was merely to say, because we didn't know at that time how many votes we had, it just merely said we published an ad in accordance with the state law on issuing bonds back in June the first time and then 3 more times thereafter, and that we did it properly and and in accordance with the law.
Again, too, Jeff, even if they still just don't have enough people in the city to go to referendum.
Yeah, the statute says you have to have 10% of the registered voters or 1,500 people, whichever is fewer. And since we have 14,400 and some odd registered voters, 10% would be fewer than 1,500, so it would need to be 1,400 and some odd. And my understanding is we have less than 900, even if you count the emails and the signatures. So it's not sufficient to trigger the referendum. And the council will take that up again on August the 1st, because last night's resolution did not resolve to go forward, given the petition that we received.
Any questions for Jeff? Thank you, sir. And as we mentioned earlier, we will still continue to go through the steps that have been asked for by our bond attorneys. They were sent an email this morning requesting information, which we will do. We will also continue to find out from the Secretary of State's office what their ruling is on emails versus signatures. Because regardless of how this one turns out, which Jeff has pretty much given you a good indication of what it will turn out to be, every time we do a bond, this is the same process that happens. There's been a lot of discussion about whether, we're transparent enough on making sure citizens know that they have this opportunity. I pointed out again last night that I think the very first press conference I had after that vote was taken, we mentioned that there's always an opportunity for a referendum on something like this for the citizens. But we want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to make sure our citizens are aware of what's happening. Also last night, the council took up a vote for our projects that we're doing with our blight. Thank you, Jamie. It was right there and I couldn't get it to come out. Our blight program, which we have $3 million that we received from the federal government last year or this year for that, and then we set aside $500,000 from our ARPA money for that. And to be able to move forward on those projects, we have to have someone to do environmental checks for us, and that's an engineering firm that does that. We had 3 people that sent in qualifications for that. There could be no amount of money in that. It was just strictly looking on qualifications. We had 3. The committee that looked at it recommended 2, Neil Schaefer and also Wagner Engineering. On a 4-2 vote, the council chose Wagner Engineering to do this particular project. And I want to speak to that just a little further. I was a little disappointed in the council's discussion of that last night. I mean, they're entitled to do any of these things that they want to discuss. But there were a couple things said that I want to clarify. It's sometimes difficult at a council meeting to do. One council member asserted that should Wagner get the work when they were doing the lobbying for us on this. Wagner Engineering, to my knowledge, are not certified lobbyers. What Wagner does, just as Neil Schaefer has done, is they will help the city write proposals. Neil Schaefer was working on one that we talked about just at the last council meeting that they wrote for us on street safety. Unfortunately, last year during the ARPA part, it became an issue with the council about between Neil Schaefer and Wagner Engineering that was, I thought, unfortunate. But we continue to move forward, and I just want to be clear that this fire department is doing that for a very special camp next door, which I love to go over and visit. Those are some of our special needs citizens, and the fire department is just leaving from some time with them, and so they were saying goodbye with a loud siren right in the middle of my press conference at the window, but that's okay. So, I don't want to belabor this point at all, but I do want to make sure that factual information is out there. And I will use that to move into the Probst Park situation and the referendum that we just had. As mayor, you try very hard to keep things moving down the middle on these types of issues, where we have as much information that's getting out that is accurate, and that you try to get the citizens and the council to try to work together on these projects. We're never going to agree completely. I've often said, let's try to work hard to disagree without being disagreeable. An example that I mentioned recently was the committee that we formed for the Red Cup District, which we will meet again this afternoon about that. We had people in the room that did not totally agree on it, but everybody was calm. Facts were put out, studies were done. You know, for me, I'm going to use myself as an example. Since I've been in office, I can remember 2 citizens who wrote a letter to the editor about me, 1 former campaign manager and 2 council members. And I would argue that none of those were completely accurate. And I can openly state to you that none of them spoke to me before they wrote their letter to the editor. I think if they had communicated with me directly before then we wouldn't have had any miscommunications there. However, I still work with every one of them, and I'm not angry with them, will not hold it against them in any way. But I just think that when you do things like that, and I've had several email exchanges with the Commercial Dispatch about their editorials where they were talking about me in it, and it is their opinion, but they did not speak to me before they wrote those. And I felt like if they had spoken to me beforehand, they might have been written differently. But I still work with the Dispatch. I don't hold a grudge about those kinds of things. We shouldn't do that, because when we do, it affects the citizens. There has been a lot of misinformation that has gotten out about this Probst Park bond. I'm going to be perfectly clear on it. I am totally behind Probst Park. I had a campaign event there. I talked about the importance of investing in the park, what I thought it would do for our citizens, and what I thought it would do for economic development around the park. We have got to do it. I spoke about it when the Board of Supervisors decided to build a new park in the city, outside the city. I talked to them about it, asked them to hold off. Let's try to work together. Let's try to get a plan where the city and the county can work. Even if we don't come back together, let's try not to duplicate. If people want to point a finger, and some of the current council members who are writing and stating things, I think that the problem began when the 2 systems split. So that would be a conversation that I think they should think about instead of what we're doing now. What I'm asking for everybody to do, and again, I'm not angry with anybody at all. I'm disappointed in some of the information that's getting out. I signed the petition. I did not go out and ask anybody to sign it. My wife signed it. The reason I signed it is, and we signed it, is because we do love the children, all the children in the community. And we want them to have a great place to go, and our adults as well. But I simply said that I thought we were moving a little too quickly to get the bond right now. I know people have complained that we've been waiting too long. Well, I think we need to set an example for our children that it is good to do your due diligence. We have also voted, the council and the Board of Supervisors voted to go for a grant that Neil Schaefer brought to our attention. We spent $10,000 to ask somebody, how much did we spend? A little under 10, right? Nine something. We spent $9,000 to engage a professional in sports recreation, a retired professor from Ole Miss, to write a grant for us where we would hopefully get $120,000 and we could do a full assessment of our park system. Well, we kind of did it ass backwards. They're building out there, we're starting to build here, and we're still trying to get these folks to come in and give us some information. I would argue that one of the reasons that we started full steam ahead down here was once they started going out there. Again, I tried to talk to everybody. I'm not saying I have all the answers, but to me, what I just said would sound like a logical stance. Okay, so we haven't done it that way, right? So what my role is as mayor is to hopefully try to move us in the right direction, even though we've started in this format that we have. And I would encourage everybody to do that, citizens as well. I see a lot of people posting things on social media that are not accurate. They're entitled to their opinions, but they're not entitled to their own facts. And when you do those kinds of things, it confuses everybody. It gets everything revved up. I think we have enough heated rhetoric going on in our national politics. We do not need it locally. And again, I will remind you that our children are watching us when we do this. And I find it insulting when someone refers to me as not caring about the children. I also find it sad that some would try to do this as a black and white thing, African American white community. It is not. We have African American children and white children playing at Probst Park. I would like to see more of that. But I will tell you that when the city and the county stopped their park system, they caused what we're having today. And I'm welcome for anybody to come and visit with me and tell me how I'm wrong on that. So my hope and prayer is, as we move forward, that we will all work together, regardless of how this turns out. I am 110% behind the park, regardless of how we fund it. As an elected official, as mayor, and as a city council member, we were elected by our constituents to try to make the best decisions we can for them, our citizens. And at the end of the day, this is not about me. It's not about a particular council member. It's not about a member of the Board of Supervisors. It is about the citizens of this community. And I would ask the citizens to follow the example of Atmos. If you would like to help with these projects, come forward with some financial support. Stop calling people names. There's a particular group in town that has the word better in their name that sent me an email at midnight and copied the editor of the Commercial Dispatch saying that we had a conspiracy blocking emails coming in to City Hall. Well, we looked at it, and at 5 a.m., when I saw it, shared it with the others, we looked at it and realized that they were typing the email address in wrong. Yes, typing the email address in wrong. But the house caught on fire, or they thought so when they did this. This is the kind of thing that is going on in this community that is not helpful. They apologized for their error. Apology accepted. Do we make mistakes at City Hall? Yes, and we will continue to. None of us are perfect, but there is no vast conspiracy up here by anybody. There was questions last night. How secure were the votes that people had left here? Were they locked up? Who saw them? Who's copied them? I mean, those are all fair questions, but we are trying to work as professionals here to do the right thing for the city. And I am asking people, and myself included, to calm down on the rhetoric. Let's work together. I don't see Tupelo, Starkville, West Point with websites in their community where they spend half their time criticizing people that they don't know, calling people names that they don't know, putting facts out about our city that they don't know. We have said this over and over, and I have said it. I feel comfortable walking in any part of this city. I have never felt unsafe. There's danger everywhere. There's as much danger in a neighborhood as there is in a Walmart parking lot. You just have to be wise and careful in when you're doing things. But to say that our city is more dangerous or dirtier than the ones in the Golden Triangle or even Tupelo is just not accurate. Go look at your data. There have been years where homicides in Tupelo and Columbus were exactly the same. I'm not going to speak to the crime in our sister cities because I do hear people tell me all the time that people from certain other cities are saying, oh my goodness, how dangerous Columbus is. Look at the news. Look at the data. So what I'm asking people to do is to take a deep breath, if you will. We're going to move forward on this project in Probst Park. We're going to have other things that we don't agree with all the time. But if we work together and we communicate, instead of trying to get on social media or write editorials or write letters to the editor that are not accurate, that make things harder to move forward on, it's not going to be helpful. Now, I'm not going to be angry with anybody and refuse not to work with them, but I promise you, I hope that some people will take a second thought about some of this because it is for the children that we're trying to do this. And they are watching us. And we're setting an example of the future. Everybody's talking about the future of our children. That is a big part of the future of our children, is how they learn from the actions of their leaders and the adults in the community. Now, I don't have anything else. I'm going to step off my soapbox. Probably said too much.
Mayor, I got one question to that. Some people said that Brooks Park don't have a plan, but we do.
Yes, we do have a plan, and one person, I think in an editorial, said that our planning process was just a delay tactic. Well, I disagree with that. We did have, how many meetings, Kevin? 5, 6 in the city? 8. 8 meetings in the city, starting in what month did we do that in?
We finished it in April, so I would say sometime probably starting in February-ish, March.
Yes, and we did them throughout the city, in different locations throughout the city. Fairly small turnout. We posted them live, I think, too. They were all live. People had, they could fill out, we had forms for them to fill out. Online information to tell us what they wanted. Do you remember how many?
Over 100.
Over 100, yeah. So we took all that information together, and there's a huge plan that Kevin has for us. Now, they're having to redo it because of the baseball fields. That list right there that Jeff just picked up, and I've shown people, lists every single thing that's going to be done at Brooks Park with this bond money. Every single thing. Now, there it is too, and Jim has some as well. I'm going to make sure they're posted here at City Hall so people can stop by and see it. We do have a plan. We've been paying people to help us get a plan. Now, is it a plan that everybody agrees with? No, and it never will be. But what I'm asking for people to do is tone down the rhetoric. Now, if there's some people out there who feel like they benefit for keeping the rhetoric going, there's nothing I can do about that. But I would like for people to get the facts, and let's all try to work together.
On the blight remediation thing that you guys hired Wagner for last night, can you just speak a little bit to what exactly the nature of that work is, and also just kind of explain the process and why there's not a price attached at this time?
I can, but I always want to give free time or fair time to our CFO and COO. Would y'all like to come up and answer that question? I love giving them airtime because they love it. They're jealous that they don't have their picture in the paper as often. And yeah, this is our very capable and hardworking COO, Jamie Garrett, who's been with us. How long now, Jamie?
About 16 months.
16 months. Okay. How many does it feel like, Jamie?
Yeah. Just happy. Okay. So the need for a environmental, there are certain questions that you have to answer, like is it a coastal barrier resource? Is there flood insurance? Is there clean air, coastal zone management, contamination and toxic substances, endangered species, explosive and flammable hazards. So pretty much the need for an environmental is to make sure that the areas that are selected, if they fit within any of these categories. So you can easily rule things out like, is it a coastal area, because we know that it's not. But when it comes to like flood zone, that's something that, you'll probably have to get with Mr. Kenny about to check those areas. So it's just basically, it's a checklist that has to be checked out. And actually, I think probably our city engineer is probably the best person to talk on that. But it's just a checklist that has to be checked off, and it's done by engineering firm.
And it's required by the federal government.
Yes, it's required by federal government before you can even begin. And the reason why it has taken so long is because we are having a very, very hard time. We get in touch with HUD to ask questions about the environment, so we really do need an engineering firm to start with this.
And when we are doing something like this, we have to make sure we're checking on the box. Uncle Sam will bring the hammer down on us.
One question.
Mm-hmm.
The city is really serious about having this blight program, trying to get it going, trying to clean up some of these things out, talking about it.
Well, there's a lot when it comes to blight, because you also have to look at the areas, and with one of the conversations is about spotting houses. So you don't want to pick a house here, pick a house there. You actually want to get more bang for your buck, maybe actually doing maybe doing a block. So that's something that the citizens can actually see. With the development you have in Burns Bottom, obviously we're about to do some work in Probst Park. You know, this is a good time to actually pick out where is the best place to put these houses. But we also need help from the citizens as well, because we actually have homes, you know, who we have different heirs who may no longer live in Columbus, and so we just have a lot of dilapidated properties, and those are issues that we also have to face. Our city attorney helps us with that, with actually being able to purchase homes, the different things that it takes to go through to actually buy a home. So the Blight program, I know when people see how horrible things look, they think that we should just have a quick fix, but it takes a lot, and we have a lot of red tape to follow, especially with these being federal dollars.
And can you speak to just how it worked as far as selecting the firm but not having any kind of price for the service yet? Is it kind of the same thing as what you guys had to do with the garbage, for example?
No, this one was a little different, because with the garbage, we did have actual prices and we had rates. But because these are professional services, they could not provide an amount for what they would use. So we had no way of knowing other than to go by what the requirements were, which were looking at the qualifications and also experience. We had 3 firms that submitted. One, based off of our judgment, wasn't as qualified as the other. The other 2 we found to be equally as qualified. And so from that, we turned it over to the mayor and council for them to make a decision. And I don't think it was a easy decision for them, but like I said, they were both qualified.
What was the third firm?
T. Barton.
It's T. Barton.
T. Barton.
Atlanta.
I'm sorry, it's right here in front of me. T.
Yeah.
Barton and Associates.
Do you want me to speak to the code of ethics of why a number can't be included?
Yes.
It comes up all the time, so it's
Wait, can you get up here?
He's coming. Hold up there.
Start at the top.
Hold up there, cowboy.
Just get all the complaints that you
Yeah, so this is a regular question we get all the time, is why can't you provide a price? And our code of ethics don't allow it. So basically, you have to select your professional based on qualifications, because 2 different engineers may approach a project 2 totally different ways, and so the price of one way may not be as adequate, or the price of another way may be overkill for what you're looking for. So first you look, are you qualified to do the work? Do you have the experience? You set up your own qualifications, select based on that, because every situation is different. You may not need a Cadillac. You may just need somebody to come in and do whatever it may be under the sun. And so just throwing it out there and saying, hey, give me a number and I'm going to take the lowest bid, you're not comparing apples to apples at that point. So the only way you can compare engineers based on price is to have a very detailed written scope, and an engineer has to actually stamp that scope to say this is a qualifiable scope. And not only that, the engineer who stamps it cannot bid the work at that point. He disqualifies himself from bidding the work. So rarely do you find engineers who want to raise their hand to write a scope and then turn around and walk away from the work, right? So historically, I've probably had one situation where we were able to do that, where they had an engineer on staff that wrote the spec that at the end of the day stamped it. That was an on-staff person that wasn't going to bid it anyway, and so therefore we were able to put a number to it. But our code of ethics is very specific on that. So cities, public entities, all their hands are bound by selecting on qualifications only. So matter of fact, but for us, our license can get pulled if we go out and start throwing numbers at things bidding without that same stamp scope in place. So that's why we just can't do it.
And let me say that, did you have another question?
Well, you can probably answer this. The $3 million in federal money that you got, is that HUD money?
Yes, and we're in the process of trying to get 300 more. When we went to Washington last summer, our ask was for $6 million, and we got half of it. So we're trying to get the other half. I've shown y'all the maps. There are over 200 blighted areas within the city that have been identified. We've had senator staff members come down to look at the blighted areas in the city. I also took that same staff member down to Burns Bottom in search of money to help down there as well. But this blight program could be a huge game changer for the city. You can easily drive in the city and see the number of blighted areas. it's happening all over, the country. There are blighted areas like this. If we can go in, get these properties, there are chances that we can make green spaces in some of them that'll improve the neighborhoods. There's a chance we can get people to come in and build houses there, different things that'll really bring these neighborhoods back. So this is an important thing that we're trying to do, but as Jamie mentioned, it doesn't happen overnight. And especially when we're going for grant dollars, which we're getting very aggressive in that. One of the things I've talked about since I've been in office, but you don't do that overnight either. And none of us have the expertise to do all that. We have to work with other companies and engineers and different professionals to get this and get it done right. And so that's what we're doing. And I understand that people want to see things happen overnight. I do too, but it just doesn't work that way. So these are the things that we're trying to do. And it reminded me of something else I wanted to address that has been written in the paper about me as far as when we were lobbying for the 2%. And I promise I'm not going to just step here and defend myself all day, because I'm not perfect either, and I'm sure I've said things that weren't accurate, but this is what happened. When we went for the 2% for 10 years for Probst Park, that money could be used for the amphitheater and any type of any kind of tourism.
Recreation or
Entertainment. And we've got a list of how all the money that has been spent in those funds, if y'all would like those, we printed that out. When we went to Jackson, and we were talking to the legislators, and even here, I was in several meetings with the director of CVB, the president of the Board of Supervisors, the Link director, all those positions, and we met with all of our local constituents, our elected officials. And the reason we wanted the 10-year was so that we didn't have to go back and do it again every 4 years. It would give us longer time. And we had that guaranteed money. We also talked about the possibility of leveraging it through bond money. We're the first ones to move that way. None of us have ever said we didn't want to do it to leverage it for bond money. We were just trying to do it at the right time, considering several things. The total debt of the city, which was discussed last night, the fact that we have buildings that roofs are about to fall in on some of them. We have a lot of capital problems that we need to deal with, that we need to make sure that we don't get our debt so high that, and the main reason we wanted to hold on this was until we got the study back, but to go ahead and start doing some work down there and start improving the appearance of it and everything. All we were saying was, we weren't saying we never wanted to do it. We were saying let's do it at the right time, and that is what we lobbied for. And let me be more specific on that, because once we didn't get the amphitheater money, and don't get me started on that, but people said, oh, why don't you use the money from the 2%? And there were people from Jackson that asked us at the time. I said, no, I will never support that. We set that money aside for Probst Park only. And I've had several people mention to me from all walks of life, why don't y'all pull that over there? I said, because it's dedicated to Probst Park. And I feel like the majority of the council feels that way too, if not all of them. So, again, facts matter. And those are the facts. And if somebody disagrees with me and would like to debate the topic, I'll be happy to do it, or sit down and visit with them. But those are the facts. If I can't say anything louder or clearer today, is that the mayor and council are dedicated to Probst Park. We just have a difference of opinion on what's the best way to steward that forward. We shouldn't be calling each other names or writing things about each other that are not factual to try to, rev up the community. That's not helpful. Okay? Yes, maybe the heat's made me a little grumpier, I don't know. But thank you all for your time. If anybody has any questions or concerns about anything I said, check with Angela and you can set an appointment with me at City Hall.